Welcome to Seahawks Forever, everybody. A rare live daytime show, trying something a little bit new this week. You know him, you love him. It's Brendan Nelson. It's been far too long since I've had you on the show. Brendan, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. Great to be on. Great to be on. And yeah, it's been a little while, but great to be back.
So this time a year ago, things were pretty chaotic in the Seahawks world. New quarterback, wide receiver trades, entire new offensive coaching staff. In fact, I think we were just kind of settling that part of it right about now. Right now, in 2026, we're celebrating a Lombardi trophy, but we don't have a lot to talk about. Kind of feels like the Seahawks have shut down and they're finished, at least in this part of free agency. Is this a little weird for you in the middle of March to not have anything to talk about?
In a general sense, I would say yes, it's a little bit odd to not really have anything to go on. It feels like the team did what they wanted to do on that first day with Job and Shaheed. And since then, it's been very, very quiet, very, very peaceful. But I wouldn't consider that to be a bad thing. And as I look at things around the NFL, for the most part, I feel like it's probably a good thing. I look at these contracts that were given out, and with one or two exceptions, I kind of feel like these are not contracts that I wish the team had handed out. These are not deals that I feel left out, not having on my team. There are a few, of course, but for the most part, I find myself thinking, okay, did I want my team to give that kind of money to Romeo Dobbs? Did I want my team to give that kind of money to, some of the other guys who are out there, guys like Khalil Mack getting 18 million guaranteed? And the answer is probably no. So it's a little bit frustrating right now. I understand, because it feels like we're losing guys and not really replacing them. On some level, it does kind of feel like we're getting left behind in what is looking to be a very competitive NFC West in 2026.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is, what could we have done to keep up? And I think the answer to that is overextend and put yourself in a bad situation and possibly still not even keep up.
So of the big four that they lost, the four that are returning projected comp picks at this point, any of them that stung for you? Any of them signed deals that you kind of wish the Seahawks would have done?
Well, I expected Walker to go, so it didn't sting. I can see a scenario where it stings in December and January. We might get there. We might get to that point, probably a playoff team at the very least. And then we get there, and we can't run the ball well enough to get to where we want to get to. And if that happens, there's definitely going to be some piece of it that's like, man, should have just kept Walker. Everything was fine. Should have just stuck with what we had. But I didn't expect him to come back. And I also don't think he's worth the contract he got. I understand he got the contract he got because he had the great playoff run, and good for him. I got no problem with that. But at the same time, I can acknowledge that he's not likely to be worth the money that the Chiefs gave him in terms of on the field contributions. Kobe, I was cool with. I like Kobe. I know he's a good player, but he is a guy that I view as being somewhat replaceable. Somebody who I think that you can find a guy who can do those things. Mafe, not really. And Woolen, I knew we had no interest in bringing Woolen back. So I was completely at peace with that. So maybe Walker, maybe, but I get it. I get the whole thing.
Yeah, Shaheed was the one that made me a little nervous, and they made us wait until late in the day that day. In fact, that news broke while my lady and I were out taking a walk, because my eyes were burning up from scrolling Twitter for like 8 straight hours, and I needed a break. And that was one that even Schneider indicated that they had to work pretty hard on that one. There's some rumors out there, some unsubstantiated ones, that maybe he turned down more money elsewhere to stay in Seattle. But I kind of feel like, given everything that happened leading up to that, and maybe in some ways it was a counter move to the Rams kind of fixing their secondary in about 48 hours. I felt like they had to come up maybe a little bit in that one, where they usually just kind of stick to their price. This is your value. Go test the market. We love you. We want you. If you want to come back for it, it's here for you. I feel like maybe they had to adjust at the last minute and come up a little bit to get Shaheed. How about you?
Yeah. I do feel like they crossed the line a little bit. And I will admit, I'm not sure if we're going to feel amazing about that contract when all is said and done. I can definitely see him not necessarily being worth that money, but I'm fine with it. I think there's a lot of atypical value with him. I think that when you consider the fact that he might be the best return man in football, and he's also doing some stuff as a pseudo running back that is valuable, I think it's fine. And when it comes to players like him, who I think are dynamic and somewhat hard to replace, I'm not interested in grandstanding over $1 million or even a couple $1 million. To me, the players that you should be making a big deal out of little overpays are the lower level players, the guys on the back end of the roster. If you've got a player who's worth 2 million, you give him 4 million, you got a problem. But if he's worth 15 million and you give him 17 million, I'm not so stressed about that.
That's a great point. That used to kind of be Schneider's MO, right? He would sign those 1-year deals to those mid-level veterans, and they would eat up a lot of cap space, a lot of those $5, $6, $7 million deals. But to your point, this year, they've done a remarkable job solidifying the back end of that roster. Like all of their unrestricted free agents now, not the big name ones, they're all locked up. All their restricted guys have been taken care of. They lost Tariq Young, but they kept everyone else. And now the numbers are coming out. A lot of these are basically veteran minimum deals. Really speaks to how much those guys understand that they're valued there and also want to be part of it.
Yeah, it does. And it also kind of speaks to how, if you're willing to wait it out a little bit, you can save a lot of money. Like Emmanuel Wilson is a good example of this. Now, I don't know this for sure, but is there a big difference between Emmanuel Wilson and Rico Dowdle? Obviously, Rico's had more production over the last couple years.
Right.
But at the same time, is that just because he's had the opportunity and Wilson hasn't because he's been behind Josh Jacobs? I think you could make a pretty decent argument that it's more to do with opportunity than it is ability. And it would not surprise me dramatically if we end up getting the same production out of Wilson this year that we would have out of somebody like a Rico Dowdle, who costs, 4 times as much, something like that.
Yeah.
So I think that you're learning that if you're willing to wait it out, then good stuff is going to get to you. Like even outside the Seahawks, I look at somebody like Rashad White, who signed for like $2 million in Washington. You're probably going to get more out of Rashad White than I think it was the Steelers are going to get out of Rico Dowdle. And that was mostly because I think they just waited. And eventually Rashad White was like, you know what? I don't care about the money. I want to play with my old buddy from college, Jaden Daniels. So you're willing to wait it out. You can get good deals. You just have to be willing to kind of tank the anxiety of wondering, man, am I going to get anybody? And for the most part, that's happened. Maybe not at edge rusher yet. That's a position where I think there's a lot of anxiety, but for the most part, you can find guys that are just as good as the guys who cost 3 to 4 times as much.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was a big Tyler Algier fan. I thought his running style would fit what they need right now. It would help the floor in that running back room. North-south physical, meat and potatoes kind of runner, can help you in the pass game as well. But I feel like that's Emmanuel Wilson too. And I wasn't as familiar with his game until we made the signing, or actually the day before after he was non-tendered, and I dug into him a little bit. It's a similar skill set that he gives you for $2 million a year instead of a 2-year commitment at 6 or 7 million or whatever it was that Algier signed for. And when you look at the teams that have been the most active in free agency, it's a little tweet from this morning. I mean, the Texans are the only good team on that list. These are teams that are at the bottom. They're trying to get to where the Seahawks are, and they're desperate and they're willing to overpay, and they have a lot of cap space because they don't have good players. There's a reason that some of these teams are more active than others. Was there one player though that signed elsewhere at all through the process that you were like, that would have worked?
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, because my pre-free agency crush was Khalil Mack. To me, that one really hit.
I didn't think he was going to be 18 million, right?
Yeah. And also beyond that, he was off the market before free agency started. He signed before legal tampering even opened.
Right.
So it's like, well, what are you going to do about that? I mean, I know that legal tampering is kind of a joke in the NFL anyway, and I know that these teams are talking with players well before then, but if the guy's going to be off the market, then the guy is going to be off the market. Other than that, like, just trying to refresh my memory on some of this stuff and seeing what, if anything, really speaks to me. I mean, for the most part, the answer is no. Like, I think Carolina did a really good job on the Devin Lloyd contract. I like that one, but we don't need Devin Lloyd. That doesn't really that doesn't really fit in with what our current roster is right now. So not really that one. Jamel Dean was a pretty decent deal, but I didn't really want to give Jamel Dean even that. I guess if I had to give a shout out to anything in particular, maybe I'd go with somebody like uh, like I would go with somebody like Kenneth Gainwell, I would say.
Hmm.
And even he actually ended up getting more money than I thought he would. So maybe not even that, but yeah, I'm just looking at these deals and there's not a lot that I'm like, oh man, that one really hurt. I'm scrolling through it right now. I'm looking at it on Spotrac.
My
There's really
trust.
not much. Maybe Rashad White would have been one because that was just 2 million. But
Yeah.
what's the difference between him and Emmanuel at a certain point?
Yeah. Yeah, they're just a stopgap, basically. We'll talk about the draft in a minute. I think they're going to hunt for maybe someone that can be a little bit longer term fix in the draft. The two guys that going into it that I had on my offseason plan that I thought, okay, if they're going to lose Reek and they're going to lose Mafe and they want to replace him with kind of ascending young players that aren't at the top of their peak market value yet, I liked Jalen Watson, not just because I'm a Coug, but I liked his play style. Thought he would have been a fit here for Mike McDonald. And I kind of thought he'd cost about what he did. They clearly weren't willing to pay that. And then meanwhile, they turn around, I think gave out what might be the best contract in free agency, the best multi-year contract anyway in Josh Jobe. I think we all expected him to get 10 million or more a year. Those were
right.
It seemed to be the consensus on the projections. So I love that. And then I thought Arnold Ebiketie would have been interesting. We know that they liked him coming out, similar profile to Mafe. Maybe he just hadn't quite gotten the opportunity yet. And actually the deal that he signed in Philadelphia, I thought was really modest. And I was kind of surprised he didn't go on day one.
Yeah.
But that was one of those at my trust level right now for their evaluation process, and especially how aligned Schneider and McDonald are and how laser focused McDonald is on knowing exactly what he wants and needs, that my immediate reaction was like, okay, they have a better plan. They have a better plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's obviously going to involve the draft. But I think after the draft too, when comp picks don't matter, I think some of these guys are going to be in play. I think the Seahawks are that team now where older veterans that know that they're going to get just as much money after the draft as they are now. So it behooves them to wait. They can go hang out in Cancun and mow their yards or whatever, and then go chase a ring. And these guys are going to be willing to take team-friendly deals because they want to play for a good team.
Right. And some of these guys on this list especially probably don't even want to sign until August.
Yeah.
Because
they don't. Clowney. Clowney won't.
They don't want to participate in camp and OTAs because they don't need to. And they know that they don't need it. And like I would say that Clowney, obviously, we know he might prefer to sign in November at this point, for all we know. I mean, that might be where he is in his career.
Right.
But Cam Jordan, 37 years old, yeah, he probably doesn't want to mess around with off-season stuff. Von Miller, same thing. I could see that. And that may be the plan here, like assemble the ring chasing all-stars. And normally that's something you might make fun of. You're like, oh man, you're signing a bunch of old washed up players that have had their best days. And yeah, obviously these guys have had their best days, but I think they have something left that is good that they can give. And they're also not guys that are going to necessarily be obsessed with getting every single dollar they can.
Yeah.
Von Miller has made a lot of money in his career. Clowney's made a lot of money in his career. That's not going to be the priority there. So you're going to get your money's worth. You may not be getting an elite all-pro player. You're going to get your money's worth. And this Seahawks team seems a little bit more into the idea of building an edge room full of good guys rather than having one superstar that can just roll out of bed and get to the quarterback on every play. So I think this makes sense. And by the way, you could play the same game at the cornerback position. There are still some guys at cornerback that you could go get after the draft. Like Cam Taylor-Britt is still a free agent. Marlon Humphrey may become a free agent in the future. I'm not sure what Baltimore's doing. It seems like they're holding him hostage. It doesn't feel like he wants to be there. It's almost like he's trying to like annoy them to the point where they eventually just say, get out of here.
And they're saying all the right things. He kind of feels like a scenario where, like, if they get the right corner in the draft, that he could be maybe a post June 1. But yeah, I think he's a guy that, if he gets released even in June, I think he'd probably be in play to come back here, depending on obviously what they do between now and then. I'm intrigued by Epinesi. He's obviously the youngest guy on the list. He's not a twitchy, flashy edge rusher, but if they get one of those guys in the draft, someone with that skill set, he's more of a big end, but he kind of fits that McDonald style. It's physical and sets the edge. I'm kind of surprised that he hasn't signed with anyone yet, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and L'Jarius Sneed, that's another guy who won't cost a comp pick no matter what because he got released.
Right. Yeah. Take a flyer on one of those guys that used to be elite. Worked for McDonald with Van Noy and Clowney in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Tams with the donation. Thank you for the super chat. Cheers to the Seahawks and their prudent spending. Hope it means long-term success. This is how much the fan base has gotten more sophisticated, as they recognize that this way that Schneider operates now is actually a good thing. Whereas a lot of fans that, hey, everybody likes the flashy new toys, right? And we all play Madden and fantasy football and they want the big names, but it's refreshing to see a fan perspective like this.
Yeah. Things have changed with awareness and perception in NFL fan bases. I think that even like a handful of years ago, people didn't know what comp picks were. I feel like the general average fan didn't know what a comp pick was, and they didn't understand how to play that game. And I think beyond that, even just in a general knowledge sense, fans are realizing that free agency and the cycle in the NFL is all about, okay, you deplete the roster of the best teams and you give the players that get depleted to the worst teams. Well, in order to get to the place where you're getting some of those really elite players in free agency, you need to be at the bottom. And that's not a trade that I think anybody would be willing to make. You'd much rather have a good team that doesn't go crazy in free agency than a bad team that goes crazy in free agency. And you look at it, it often doesn't work out when you're one of the teams that goes crazy in free agency.
It's one of the things that I love about this time of year. I really like seeing how every team has a different philosophical approach and organizational approach to this thing, and wildly different approaches to it. And the title of this show is, are the Seahawks winning the offseason? And what I mean by that is it kind of feels like the Seahawks are taking the chess versus checkers approach, or 3D chess, or whatever analogy that you want to use. That the risk in doing it the way that they're doing it is trying to keep the foundation, keep the young core, add some shrewd, good pieces to it. And then we're going to talk about this in a little more depth in a minute, really looking towards next year's draft to kind of load up the next wave of young guys to add to the mix. There's some risk in that, right? In that sometimes staying in one place leads to regression. Right now, as we sit here today on March 18th, do you feel good enough about the Seahawks roster as we sit here today compared to the Rams and the 49ers that you're comfortable with the plan?
I think it's the right plan, but I do acknowledge the fact that there's a very good chance we get passed up this season. I don't consider that to be some capital offense. We did win the Super Bowl last year. You can't win the Super Bowl every year. That's not how this league works. It's very, Patriots Belichick type stuff here, where for the most part, with maybe one exception, when Belichick was in New England, his philosophy was, I'm just going to try to be in it every year. I'm going to be in it every year for 20 years. And some years we're going to get to the end of the year and I'm not going to have enough, and we're going to fall a little bit short. And I know that I'm going to get reamed by the media and reamed by the fan base, because people are going to be mad. People are going to be like, well, 2006 is a great example of this. Remember, that was the year the Seahawks traded for Deion Branch, and they got to the end of the year. They had no receivers. Their number one receiver was like 45-year-old Troy Brown or whatever. They had Rashae Caldwell that year, and they lose in the AFC title game to the Colts. And the conversation the whole offseason was, if you had just kept Deion Branch, you've got a free Super Bowl. And I that's frustrating. I agree. As a fan, how can you not be frustrated by that But at the same time, his strategy was, look, I'm trying to keep this window open indefinitely while I've got guys like Tom Brady and to a certain extent Vince Wilfork. And that means not giving a market-setting deal to a guy like Deion Branch, who's not that great of a receiver. So sometimes that results in me giving away a Super Bowl that should have been mine. But I'm keeping the window open. And that kind of feels like what we're going for right now. And I can't argue against it, but that doesn't mean that it might not hurt at the end of this year when the Rams are just better than us and they beat us and we're not there and they're there. Like, that's possible. That can happen. But that doesn't mean it's bad that we're pursuing this philosophy.
Yeah. And if you take it the next step, you can kind of see the vision in that, you know, it's rare for a Super Bowl team, first of all, to suffer this few losses on their roster. Usually Super Bowl teams aren't this young. And when teams win the Super Bowl, they have a bunch of aging guys retire, they ride off into the sunset. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. And there's more roster churn that needs to happen. Whereas the Seahawks are almost saying, look, we feel good enough about our young core right now because it is so young, third youngest roster in the league at the beginning of the year. I think by the end of the year, Snap weighted, it was fifth, incredibly young for as good as that roster was. Let's lean into that. Let's bank on that, our coaching staff, and some ascendance, right? Some progression and development from those guys and continuity and how that benefits us. And we're going to do what we can in 2026 to win another one. Obviously, they're going to be in the running. I don't think anyone doubts that. But then you know what? The year after that, and now we've got our young stars locked up. And now 2027, we're going to extend our quarterback. Our cap's still going to be in great shape because we didn't spend irresponsibly or aggressively this offseason. And now we go into a 2027 draft that's considered to be the best one in a long time. And now we have 12 picks in it. And now here we go. And we're going to load up again. And the core is still going to be there and still going to be young. It almost seems like they're playing like they're 3 steps ahead.
Yeah. And maybe they get to the midpoint of this season and then they're trade deadline players again because they have all those picks.
Yeah.
Maybe there's, I don't know, maybe there is a running back you trade for at the deadline. Maybe by that point, somebody like Achane is a lot cheaper because Miami's just fire selling because they know they're going to lose him at the end of the year anyway. Maybe there's an edge rusher you trade for. If a team like, I don't know if the money works, but if a team like the Chargers isn't where they thought they would be, maybe Khalil Mack is like, hey, can you get me out of here? By the way, you know what Khalil Mack's playoff record is in his career?
No.
It's 0-6. He's never won a playoff game.
He doesn't even want to win Super Bowl. He just wants to win a playoff game.
Yeah, so he might be like, hey, can you guys get me out of here? I'd really like to win a playoff game. You know, there are going to be things like that are available to you as well, and you have the extra picks to make that happen. So all these things are worth considering.
I even wonder, like, you know, we've talked so much about trade scenarios because the Max Crosby thing was such a big deal for a while. Doesn't sound like he's going anywhere. I know some fans are into the Kayvon Thibodeau idea. I talked to Corbin Smith a couple weeks ago. He floated the idea of Tyree Wilson. We know that, you know, he's a guy that we scouted heavily the year that we took Devin Witherspoon. But they now are in a position where they're kind of loaded up on edge because they went and backfilled with Kwity Paye and they extended, who's the other guy, their other young edge?
Malcolm Kuntz.
And they also still have Tyree Wilson the last year of his deal, although I guess they haven't made a decision on his 5th-year option yet. And so they're kind of loaded at edge, like one of those younger guys. If they're going to truly be committed to hanging on Max Crosby, a guy like Wilson might be available. There might be a move left to be made there. Yeah,
maybe. And I don't think Tyree Wilson's done enough to really be that expensive in a trade. So
no, shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about the draft now. And I feel like, and we chatted about this a little bit last night, like every time we talk about the draft, and I can even see it in the comments already, like all anyone wants to talk about is running back, edge, and corner for obvious reasons, because those are the glaring needs right now. Like they need to add at each of those positions, not just to contribute in 2026, but especially the edge class. You start to look kind of to 2027 and like they probably need to add 2 to the mix. And, you know, we'll see how Jared Ivey, Connor O'Toole, guys like that fit into this equation once we get to get them on the field. But with that being said, is when we talk about the plan and how smart it is, the one risky part of this, it seems like to me, is they kind of have to nail this draft. They really do need to come out of this with, in my opinion, a corner, an edge, and a running back that can play key roles as rookies.
Yeah, and that's a dangerous
Mhm.
proposition, especially at edge. I talk about this all the time, but with the exception of the generational edges, and I'm talking like Will Anderson, Von Miller, Alden Smith, those guys that go in the top 5, top 10, edges don't do that much when they're rookies. And we've had a couple examples of that in the last few years. Boye Mafe did nothing when he was a rookie. Well, he played a little bit, he was okay. But Derek Hall was basically a red shirt that rookie year. He had no impact on the game whatsoever.
Yeah.
So that's not uncommon. Most rookie edge rushers really need that rookie year to just learn. So if you're expecting somebody to come in here as a rookie that you get in even in the first round of this draft or the second round or whatever, and you're thinking they're going to get 10 to 12 sacks, that's just not realistic. That's not how this works. So that is a dicey proposition, I will admit. Now, you still probably have to do it and hope it works out. And I do think there are some guys in this draft that can help, but just understand that you are not necessarily going to be able to tap that and just get immediate returns on investment.
Yeah, which again, I do think plays into once we get to that point where comp picks are out the window and they can sign anyone they want to. They're still going to add probably some veteran depth at corner, to your point from earlier, rather than just having to rely on young guys. Before we get to some of the other position groups, though, I do want to get your thoughts. I think first of all, we all agree, don't we, that John Schneider, who used to be known for trading down in the first round and out of the first round, kind of as his MO, hasn't done it in a long time. We all kind of agree that he's probably working really hard this year to do that, don't we?
Yeah. By the way, can you still hear me? My browser's frozen. I can't.
Yeah, your picture's frozen, but you sound fine.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on about that. Sorry, guys.
That's all right.
But what I would say is that he's probably wanted to trade down in many recent drafts and just hasn't been able to find the trade. Oh,
Can still hear you.
okay, good. Anyway, yeah, I think that there is a desire, but what happened is other teams figured out he wanted to trade down so badly they realized they didn't have to make good offers.
Mm,
Like I think 2019 was the last time we traded down in the first round, and that trade down was a disaster. We got nothing.
yeah.
And I think after that point, it was like, okay, the jig is up. So I'm sure he'd like to trade down this time, but in a draft this week, I don't know how much I value having a bunch of extra picks. I'd rather try to find somebody that is actually good, and hopefully there is somebody good available when we pick, and just take them. Like if Chris Johnson's there, I don't want to risk missing that guy. If TJ Parker's there, or even a Zion Young, I'm just like, hey, can I take my guy and get out of here, please? So, yeah.
Yeah, you may have given away part of your answer already. But and by the way, everybody, Brendan's in the dark, but he is here. He is here with us. It's Brendan.
No
Nelson.
idea what's going on. Sorry about that.
Everything looks good from my end. We'll just we'll keep rolling, and hopefully you come back.
All right.
I hesitate to refresh the page because we might lose the stream altogether. So we'll hang in here. I'll tell you what, though, maybe I'll close some. I don't know. Maybe it is on my end. I've got a couple windows open. We'll just close those just to be sure. With that being said, and you might have taken some of your own answer from this, though, regardless of whether it's 32 or I like to trade back to 38, 39 a lot with Houston and Cleveland because there's a clear match on the trade chart there. It lines up really well. I think with Cleveland, you get 107 in addition, and Houston, it's similar. Do you have like a favorite guy at each of those three key positions that you just, man, they just look like Seahawks to you right now?
If you're picking at like 38, 39.
Wherever it is, just that first pick, somewhere in that range. This draft class is kind of there's such a lack of consensus, man. I have a hard time sometimes. Guys that I target, even Chris Johnson, you named him, he's a good example. Sometimes he's not there at 32, and sometimes he's there at 45. It's kind of all over the place. But just some guys at this part of the process at each of those position groups, maybe even closer to 64, that you just think are perfect fits.
I'm not crazy about any running back at 30, 32 or 38 or whatever. Like Jadarian Price is the name that comes up there a lot. He would be fine. I wouldn't object to Jadarian Price, but I wouldn't be overly excited. Mike Washington is probably the most fun running back you could get there.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessary. There's a lot of problems there, though.
I
So
I've gone back and forth. I know he's become a fan favorite, and why not when you're 6'1", 230 and you run a 4.4 and all those things that he did at the combine, and he has such a smooth running style. But the more that I study him, I went from loving him from the traits for obvious reasons to that running style. It's so smooth and fluid, more Sean Alexander than it is Marshawn Lynch. I'm not sure that he has that really distinctive, decisive one cut and go style that you really need to thrive in outside zone. That's my question about him. And then ball security. There's some other questions too, but
right.
A guy was challenging me online the other day about like what makes you think he's going to translate to the league when he only had one productive year, right? And my answer to that was players develop, they get better. He actually got better as he stepped up in competition, and he's just 22 years old. So yeah, there's some questions there, but man, the skill set's enticing.
Right, and players get drafted high because of traits all the time. Trey Lance, who played joke competition in college, went number 3 overall. I think it was number 3 overall for Trey Lance. But yeah, so running back is tough. I'm not going to be upset if we got somebody like a Jadarian Price or a Mike Washington at 32 or 38 or 39 or wherever. But I would understand the risk. I would understand there's real downside there. Edge, TJ Parker's become one of my favorites. I think he would be a great McDonald edge. I think he could be like the next DeMarcus Lawrence. Zion Young is similar. I have a similar kind of feeling about Zion Young as a potential edge in this defense. Like, we know what McDonald's type is now. He likes the bigger power edges. He doesn't want these little speed guys. So those guys jump out. Even somebody like an Akeem Mesidor, who I know is already 38 years old or whatever. So it's a little bit bumpy, but I look at him and I do see a guy that McDonald would like. So there are some edges that I'm into for sure here. And corner,
who's your favorite of the there's 4 guys that are always kind of clumped right around 32. Sometimes one in particular goes a little higher. That, we're talking Avion Terrell, Brandon Cisse, Chris Johnson, and Colton Hood, where they're almost physically identical to each other. Their skill sets are incredibly similar. Their movement skills, everything else. Which one of those 4 is your favorite?
I would say probably Chris Johnson, because he strikes me as the best zone corner in this whole draft. The other guys like Cisse, a little bit more of a man corner at this point in his life. That can change. That can get better. I thought that Witherspoon was more of a man corner in college, but I look at Chris Johnson and I see a guy who's ready to hit the ground running in a zone heavy defense like this defense. So that would be my guy.
Hang on a second. I'm just going to throw a banner up on the screen just so people know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what's going on, guys. StreamYard hasn't done this to me in like a year, so maybe I did something wrong.
This reminds me of the first time I interviewed Matty Brown about 5 years ago, and he was a little camera shy at the time, and he would just put his logo up and do audio at the time. Maybe in post, I'll put a good picture of you up there or something. Well, let's talk about some of the positions then that aren't being talked about, right? Which really come into play, like if Schneider's unable to move down, and it's going to be tougher this year in a draft that's devalued, that's seen as a lesser draft. Some teams may at least be unwilling to pay typical freight to move up, according to the trade charts. That being said, I've talked to some people connected to the organization that have basically told me, look, we're not going to schedule a draft party this year. Let that sink in, or take that however you want it to, right? So we may have to take less than some other years to move down, but provided they do, then my first thought will be, okay, that kind of opens up some of the possibilities, right? But even if they stay at just their top 3 where they are, could they surprise us? Is there a position group maybe that we're not thinking about, where there's some guys in this draft that you think, oof, I could see if that spot comes up, 64 comes up, I could see this guy being high on their board, even though it's a position maybe some of us don't think they need?
Well, I'm looking at safety, and I think safety is a fun sleeper, because to me, Julian Love getting a little bit older, contract starts to really bloat up here. he might only be here another year. And I do think he'll be here in 2026, no doubt about it. But Julian Love could be not much longer for this roster. And Ty Okada, he was good last year in a limited role, but there's a real possibility that we get a full 17 games of Ty Okada this year and we find out he's just okay. And maybe we're like, we got to do a little bit better. And we know McDonald likes to do the 3 safety stuff. So right now I'm looking at, let's say you're sticking at 32 and EMW's there, right? The Toledo safety that everyone's kind of freaking out about. That's hard
because everybody's trying to get their version of Nick Emanwari and they think that he's the closest thing to it. That can be a slippery slope sometimes when teams try to force that.
Yeah, and I don't think he's going to be there anymore because his combine was too good. But Dylan Thieneman, that's a little. But if he's somehow there at 32, and I don't know how that would happen, but if he's there at 32, I don't know how I pass that up. He's really good too. And you get down to the second round, and you've got the LSU guy and Kamari Ramsey. There are going to be some safeties here that I think are going to be kind of enticing. You get down to the third round, Jalen Kilgore. Great name, phenomenal name, by the way.
Right.
Yeah. So I would say safety is kind of the sleeper to watch. And I'd also play a little bit with the idea of some of the interior offensive line stuff, because look, I don't have a big problem with Anthony Bradford. I think that he's fine where he is. I'm not really in some big hurry to run him out of the building, but he is in the last year of his deal. And I think that if the opportunity is there, you might say, hey, this is an opportunity to get a right guard of the future because Christian Haynes hasn't shown us anything. So if you get to, your first round pick and somehow, some way Ginnings Dunker is still there, maybe that's the play. If you get to your second or third round pick, Keelan Rutledge is going to be there. He had a really good combine. He's actually a really underrated athlete. Jalen Farmer in the third round, I think would be
fun, isn't he? He's so frenetic. Like the technique, his arms are all over the place. He just it kind of reminds me of the Tasmanian Devil. But watching him, especially pulling and getting out in space, like his motor and his physicality is fun to watch.
Yeah. Even a position like center where Sundell, I think, has 1 year left on his deal. And with what just happened with Linderbaum,
center market.
The center market might have just gotten completely destroyed. For all we know, Jalen Sundell is going to get $19 million a year next year. I don't know anymore. So if you've got the opportunity to get someone like a Parker Brailsford, who is a pure zone scheme fit with his mobility, maybe that's the play to make. So center is also kind of interesting to me. I don't really see too much going on with anything else.
I feel
it's
like
hard for me to see receiver.
Wide receivers always in play. I feel like for special teams value, obviously, but also I know fans like to look at the depth chart and go, okay, now that we got Rashid back, like people are really excited about the possibilities now. Shaheed with a full offseason, Torrey Horton another offseason. You get those two together. At this point, I'm very skeptical that Torrey Horton can be durable enough to be able to count on him. And then I think we can all agree that 2026, very likely Cooper Kupp's last season.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't mind, even though there's some young guys, practice squad guys that I think have some nice upside, I wouldn't mind adding one more guy that could kind of get into that mix and maybe project as someone that can help in 2027 at least. But
yeah,
I'm with you on the interior offensive line. I wouldn't mind adding one more guy at any point in the draft, really, that has center guard versatility. It would be nice to just kind of protect ourselves that way. I'm a believer in Bryce Cable. I know how much coaching staff likes him. I like the athletic profile. I think at some point he'll get an opportunity to compete with Bradford, maybe as early as training camp this year. But it would be nice to add one more layer to that as a guy that could back you up at a couple spots and maybe give you starter upside, because at this point, like, I'm not even sure Christian Haynes makes the roster.
I think he barely made it last year. I think that there was a scenario where he doesn't even make it last year. And he, I feel like if there was something there, we would have seen it by now. When he came out from UConn, he was already 24 years old.
Right.
And he had like 6 years of experience at UConn and had started almost that whole time. He should have come out a pretty finished product. This was not some 20-year-old that had potential but no reps. This guy had reps. And To me, he is what he is at this point, and what he is a player that barely belongs on an NFL roster.
Here's an interesting one from Raw Dreams. Chris Johnson at 32 and Jonah Coleman at 64. There's obviously a lot of affection for Coleman in the Pacific Northwest with what he did at Washington. He's a guy. They had their pro day yesterday at UW. I predicted he wouldn't run a 40 at all before the draft. I was right. He's not going to do it. It's not a big part of his game. Is there enough juice on tape from him that you think that what he does well at the college level can translate?
Well, the thing is, I think the main thing with Coleman as you go to the NFL is he is a great pass protector. He's probably the best pass protecting back in this draft. That's probably the main thing going on there. You go beyond that though, like, yeah, he catches the ball a lot, but I don't necessarily think he's a great receiver. He really kind of, and don't get me wrong, this isn't really a him problem so much as it is a team problem, but against better competition, he didn't do anything. Like it was, most of his numbers were put up against the weaker teams that Washington plays at the start of the season. Is he worth a top 100 pick? Yeah, sure. Would I be upset if we got him in the second round? No. But I don't know if I see the upside there. I see a guy who's built like a power back because he does kind of have that Charbonnet-like build, but
he's built like an early down back.
Yeah, he's not really a power back.
Yeah, pass protection stuff implies third down back, but he doesn't kind of have the rest of that skill set.
Yeah, he's kind of a funky player. He's a little bit of a funky player. I don't dislike him. I would be a little bit careful of that one, though. I don't know how that game translates. Like, I'd much rather get somebody like a Mike Washington, who I think has running back one upside, even with the downside that exists.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of talk about Devon Achane. There were some rumors around the trade deadline. I think Tony Pauline said that the Seahawks really liked him. He's obviously a great zone scheme fit. Last year of his deal in Miami, it makes all the sense in the world for them to trade him. They're clearly tearing that thing down to the studs and playing for the 2027 draft. And yet they're on record as saying, we love him. We want to extend him. He's part of what we want to build around. Why would you pay a running back Ken Walker type money, which Devon Achane's going to get that if he gets to the open market, if Ken Walker got it, when you're in a 2 to 3 year rebuild? What value would you be comfortable with trading for Devon Achane, or do you even think it's a good idea?
Yeah, Achane. I think it's, I don't know. He changes his pronunciation like every couple months. So I think it's Achane. That's what I've kind of adjusted myself to saying.
Now Travis Etienne's gone and thrown the whole thing into a mix because now we're supposed to pronounce his name the same way. So
yeah, I'm not too happy about that. But to me, he's like the idealized fit for the Shanahan offense because of his speed and his cutting ability. So that is something that I covet very heavily. And under normal circumstances, I would not be a big fan of paying big money to a running back. But in this offense, with the way the NFL is right now, I do feel like that is probably the play. If you can trade for him, go for it. And this draft is not good. So if you have to give up 32 to get Achane, I'm not going to object too hard to that. Yes, it's a little bit painful, but Achane is younger right now than some of the players in this draft. Like, he's younger than Akeem Mesidor, I think. He's younger than there's this one other edge rusher that I've been looking at the last couple of days who's going to be 25 when the season starts. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was like Joshua Josephs or something. But the point I'm trying to make is that he is very it's not like you're trading for a 29-year-old running back. This is a 24-year-old running back who is perfect for your offense, extremely talented. And he's also one of the best pass catching backs in football. He is a massive weapon in the passing game. And you put that all together, and I'm like, yeah, if I have to give up my first round pick to do that, I'm not going to shut that down. And yeah, he's going to get paid. But let's not forget that Ken Walker got paid what he got paid mostly because he had a dominant playoff run. Achane doesn't have a playoff run.
Right.
Like that. So for all we know, yeah, it's going to be about the same. Maybe it won't be more, though. I think there were some people who were like, well, Walker got 14, so Achane's going to get 18 million a year. I'm not so sure that's true. Achane's played in one playoff game in his career, and he had 30 yards. So for all we know, the Walker thing was just kind of exclusive to him because of his unique circumstance. and even a better running back, and Achane is a better running back, would not necessarily get that payday.
Yeah, it's an interesting exercise. I could see them given, and John Schneider's been on the record and been pretty outspoken about, like, we don't like this draft very much. And then we can see, playing towards next year's draft, it could just be a case where they see the value in the rental, even if they know going in he's probably going to get Ken Walker money next offseason. We don't want to pay that to a running back, but having him for 1 year to kind of bridge the gap while we figure that position out in this draft, especially if it doesn't involve 32, I could see 64 being fair value for that. Maybe once they get into the draft, right? They see how their first pick goes and it doesn't go running back, or they don't like the way that class falls in the draft. I could see that just sacrificing a 2 this year just to get 1 year out of that guy, knowing then again, kind of a Philadelphia Eagles approach, right? So then he does walk in free agency next year. Now you get another pick and you get a 4th round pick in 2028. I could see that happening. Yeah.
And maybe Schneider would be willing to extend Achane, but he wouldn't extend Walker. But maybe that's because Walker struggled to stay healthy.
Yeah, they could absolutely view them differently,
because Achane has stayed healthy the last 2 years. He missed 1 game last year, and it was mostly because the Dolphins were tanking because it was the last game of the year. So it's different with Achane.
We do get a lot of kickback. I'm sure you do too. I hear from a lot of fans that just the positional value thing, it was really a big topic around the draft about 10 years ago. And it hasn't really gone anywhere, right? Even Seahawks fans themselves, a lot of them were livid when we took running backs in the 2nd round 2 years in a row. That's bad positional value. And so I still hear feedback like this from fans. They just want no part of a running back at 32. But I try to tell them, I don't think 32 this year is equal to 32 in other years. When you're talking about a bad draft, that's not even just bad depth wise. And when I say bad, I don't mean not talented. One of my theories about this class and why it's down a little bit is all the COVID guys are gone. And so for the most part, we're seeing these 20, 21 and 22-year-olds coming out. They're coming out after 3 years. They're true juniors now. A lot of these guys in this class, they're just not developed yet. It's going to take a little more time. So there's upside in this draft. There just isn't certainty. But you look at the top, we're talking about what? 2 inside linebackers going in the top 10. You talk about the edge class in particular, and TJ Parker, he might be the only one in this draft that has the potential to have a complete skill set. Even the guys at the top of the draft, the edges that are going to go in the top 20, they're all lacking something. Short arms, off, whatever. They're all flawed. We don't have a legitimate blue chip edge at all in this class. So when you start talking about the value of 32, it's not what it usually is. And so when I look at the draft, the Seahawks get stuck at 32 and they're looking at their board and they love whoever. Take your pick. Washington, Jadarian Price. I think most people agree those are the top 2. You're not asking yourself, is it worth it to use 32 on this guy? Are we gonna get a bunch of shit on Twitter? No, they're thinking about how are we going to get to 64 and all those players that we lose in between. Which one of these on the board right now do we need to come out of this draft with? And I don't think they'll hesitate to take a running back at 32. We know this because they took a running back. They took Rashad Penny even earlier years ago.
Yeah, and John's feeling himself right now, right? Like he's the guy in this league who, he's moved off his franchise quarterback twice in a 5-year span, and it's worked out brilliantly both times. Like no one else is doing that. Nobody else is moving off franchise quarterbacks unless it's like a Tua level quarterback or somebody like that,
right,
or somebody who's really, really old. So I don't think John really cares what people have to say. And as for the positional value thing of the running back, one thing that I think needs to be said here is that the league is different now than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, even 6 years ago, running backs really felt like they didn't matter. You had the Chiefs winning Super Bowls with washed up LaShawn McCoy as their number 1 running back. And they had some other random guys at running back that weren't even in the league 2 years later. Like you looked at that Chiefs team and you were like, yeah, running back is dead. Running back doesn't matter at all anymore. It's just about your quarterback and your passing game. That's not really what's going on right now. You've had the Seahawks win the Super Bowl. They were very much a run-first team. Year before that, the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and they were built around Saquon Barkley, and they have a quarterback whose arm is basically a blunderbuss. So,
a scouting term I haven't heard before.
That's a little bit of a deep cut there, but basically a blunderbuss is like an old school shotgun, no accuracy beyond a very short distance. Um, and running back matters more now. Teams are running the ball more. The running the game is more important than it was 6 years ago, even. Things are different. So I think you have to reconsider your priors on things like that.
Here's a guy I'm really intrigued by. Might have the most enticing set of traits in this edge class, Malachi Lawrence. He also seems to exhibit some other things that the Seahawks value. He stayed at UCF his entire career, turned down NIL money to go elsewhere. Yeah, there's some holes in his game. He's raw. There's some development left ahead, but he seems to be creeping up. He's sometimes a favorite of mine at 64 in mock drafts. I have seen him creep up. I saw a national mock this week that had him at 32. Actually, is this crazy? How do you feel about Lawrence's upside?
Well, every year there are those big winners at the combine, right? And he was one of them. He had a brilliant combine. I was actually writing up a scouting report for him yesterday for a video I'm going to make, I think, later today, actually. So, yeah, he was one of the big winners at the combine. And the thing that really stands out is he's got these insane testing numbers, the sub 1.6 10-yard split, and he's not tiny. Like a lot of the time you'll see these guys that have the 1.59 or the 1.58 10-yard split, but they're like 235 pounds. And it's like, okay, James Pierce was a good example of this.
Yeah.
But
even
Lawrence,
this year, guys like Romello Height and Joshua Josephs, who you mentioned, like those guys have some get off, but man, they're small.
Yeah. And Lawrence is like 255.
Right.
And I couldn't find his age, but I think he's relatively young. So he could even pack on a little bit of weight just by filling out his frame. Now, I do think that there are some things that need to be fixed here. When I look at him, I don't think he's a great run defender yet. I think sometimes he chases the big play to the detriment of the defensive integrity as a whole. He's not really a power guy yet, and we know that's what McDonald likes, but I feel like that's all fixable. So I ended up coming up with him as kind of an early second guy, maybe. I'm not quite there with him at 32, but I'm so close. What's the difference, right? I'm not going to be mad if we end up with him at 32. Maybe I'm going to feel like, yeah, maybe you could have traded down and gotten him at like 38, 39, but I'm not going to be upset about that either because he is such a physical specimen. And you kind of have to know that any edge rusher you take in this draft is going to take a year to get where he needs to be anyway. So what's the difference?
We talked earlier about positions that might surprise us. This is a good one here from Rockman Drums. With Big Cat and Reed being older and questionable to return, don't be surprised if we take a defensive tackle at 32. I have mentioned this several times over the last few weeks. The backlash is swift and intense. I'm told I'm crazy, that we're fine at defensive tackle, to which I say, you probably thought we were fine at running back for years, about a year ago, right?
Yeah.
You thought we were fine at edge for years, about a year ago. I absolutely agree with this. I think this is the last year Leonard Williams deal. I absolutely think they'll try to extend him, maybe even this offseason. I don't think that's getting talked about enough.
Yeah.
Jaron Reed, he's got 2 years left on his newest deal, but every year he plays might be his last. We love Byron Murphy, but he's about to get really expensive. We love what we've seen from Riley Mills, but we don't know if there's certainty there. This is a sneaky good defensive tackle class, especially later in the draft. There's some true nose tackles in this class, some who can even give you a little bit more than just traditional zero tech stuff. And there's some like smaller guys, Zane Durant, guys like that, kind of smaller guys with a lot of juice. If we add more picks, wouldn't surprise me at all if they take a tackle in this class.
Yeah, especially the nose thing, because in my mind, we still don't have a true nose tackle. And most of the time, it doesn't matter, right? But to me, when we play the Rams, it matters because they're a power team. They power run it. They run the ball up A gap and B gap all game long. And that's a big reason why I don't think we do a very good job stopping the run against the Rams, because we don't have a true nose tackle to counter that. So that's at least a thought. Now, I personally, I suspect that McDonald is perfectly happy with the defense he's built and feels like he doesn't need a nose tackle. But I do have it in my mind that we could use a true one tech or nose guard or whatever terminology you want to use. So yeah,
boy, it'd be fun to watch Daryl Jackson Jr. next to Byron Murphy, or Byron Murphy next to Daryl Jackson Jr. That guy is he showed up for the Senior Bowl for one day of practice, and immediately you could see the difference between anything you've ever seen on tape from before, where he's almost always being double teamed. Like, he just dominated. And then he went home. He just came in for one day of practice and kind of dominated guys, threw guys around because he had already been at the Shrine game. He did both. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, there's some guys that look like they might be falling. Caleb Banks is interesting, but he just broke his foot for the second time, I think is the deal there. Christian Miller's a guy that I see falling a lot. I don't think it's in play early, but I think at some point in this draft, if they get some extra value, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Dante Corleone, currently a fourth rounder.
Yep.
That's a true nose tackle right there. All he did was play one tech at Cincinnati. And also, you don't have to worry about coming up with a nickname for him because his nickname is so obvious, right? He's the Godfather. Like, there's nothing to discuss.
Right. Well, if you want nicknames and a nose tackle, I'll throw Dominique Orange into the mix too. I think I've seen people refer to him as the Big Citrus, so that plays pretty well too. Well, hey, look, this has been great, Brendan. I think it's time to wrap up. We had some good participation here. You guys, thanks for being here. We're going to play around with some earlier live streams now and pay attention. Be back Friday. Rob Staten will be joining me at about the same time frame. You said you've got a video coming out later today, but let some people know some other things that you're working on.
Yeah, so I'm doing my draft stuff. A lot of what I've been doing over the past couple weeks before free agency, and now that free agency's kind of cooled down, basically a lot of draft evaluation stuff. I want to get through like 250, 260 draft evals before the draft at least. I understand that this year's draft is not the most appealing for Seahawks fans because our picks are so low, but I still want to know what we're dealing with as much as possible, so keep an eye out on that. Obviously, I'm talking about all the stuff that happens across the league as it affects the Seahawks. I've got a video about the Achane stuff coming out later today. I had a mock draft go up earlier this morning. And as time goes by, we're going to continue to learn stuff. Like I saw something about how Cody White might have been re-signed. And I know that's kind of a small thing. I know that's not something that's going to get a ton of attention, but that's something I'm going to address. So basically, I'm just talking about anything and everything Seahawks related as it comes out. Maybe we're going to learn more about this DeMarcus Lawrence. Won't he retire? Apparently he won't, but maybe we'll learn more about that.
That's what I've been told. Yeah, nothing public yet, but it sure sounds like he's coming back.
I always kind of felt like he wasn't going to. You got to go for the repeat, even if you got to try to defend the title.
And he's got like 6 kids, that another $15 million is not a bad idea. I know he's made 140 in his life, but that extra 15, diapers aren't cheap. And it's cost a lot of money. Apparently, we've got this from a couple of people in the comments while we've been doing this. The Dolphins have come out today and said they're not trading Achane, which is what you're going to say if you want to drive his value up and try to trade him. So I'll believe it when August rolls around if he's still a Dolphin. But
why would you want to keep him right now? Like, what is that doing for you, man? You're not going to re-sign him at this point. And even
maybe they think they could get more at the deadline, but that doesn't make a lot of sense because now you're asking teams to give up a 27 pick and you're getting half a season out of them. So that's my thing. It's like, okay, I understand they got to say that right now, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Like I'm sure they would be willing to trade him tomorrow if they got an offer they liked. So, well, in the 4th year of a rookie deal isn't cost prohibitive for most teams. So maybe a team goes into the draft, doesn't get a guy that they like. Maybe a deal happens after that.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's Brandon. Be sure to get over to his channel on YouTube and give a sub if you haven't already. Thanks for being here. Again, we'll make sure that it's not 2 years again before you're back on the show. And next time, don't be so shy. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. I will try to get that sorted out. StreamYard has done this to me before, but usually it doesn't. It hasn't done this in a while, so I don't know what's going on. My bad.
Well, it was good to have you. Love the conversation, and thank you all for showing up. I'm going to let you go, and then I'll say goodbye to the folks. But Brendan, we'll see you again soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right, you guys. That was cool. Sorry that he wasn't visible for the second part of that. But I really enjoy doing this. We'll do more of these lives during the day. I think it's fun to kind of react to more news instead of doing it later. And I will say this, as much as I have said in the past, sometimes we'll do shows at night and some of you'll come back and say, hey, you're on at the same time as this other creator. And can you schedule around it or whatever? That's tough to do, and I've pushed back on that a little bit in the past that, can't coordinate with all these guys, and it's a good problem to have. I have said for a long time, I think the Seahawks as a group have the best congregation or collection of content creators in the league. I really do. We all like each other and respect each other, and we're on each other's shows and everything else. It's almost impossible to try to counter program and make sure that I do live shows when they don't compete with those guys. But I'm always trying to improve and grow, and maybe I can be better at that. And so I am going to try to, as I move forward, been talking to a guy that's assisting me with some programming stuff and has kind of in the background for quite a while. And we had a real long conversation yesterday with sort of the direction of the show and evaluating my first year as a full timer and kind of where we want this thing to go. And the word that came up yesterday from him, he's a consultant in marketing, is consistency. And so we're gonna lock in some regularly scheduled live streams on a more regular basis. And so that's on me, and I'll make sure and communicate it to you. And the best way to always know what's going on, first of all, subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to help support me. And follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever, because I don't do anything content-wise without putting it there as well. So let's get a little music to take us out, as we always do. That was way too loud. So sorry. Not for me, but I know for some of you, I'll probably get a couple of comments on that. Had it potted up just a little bit too high. Forever and always, go Hawks. Thanks for being here. Thanks to Brendan Nelson for joining me. And we will see you again tomorrow. Rob Guerrero and I doing the NFC West mixtape tomorrow. We'll go live with that as well, 11 o'clock Pacific time. And then 9 o'clock a.m. Pacific time on Friday, Rob Staten's going to be joining me. We'll talk about his horizontal big board and dig into some of his latest thoughts on the draft class as well. See you guys. Thanks.